Boruto to Boot Vortex Chapter 9 spoilers are out, and this is one of the most satisfying chapters of Part 2 for me for a couple of reasons. First, we get to see more of Jura in action, and not only does he make a mini tail beast bomb with his eye, which was really interesting how he closed one eye as he formed a mini Biju bomb, the dude also pulls out a book when talking to Shikadai just to fact check him, and I love it. I love Jura and his books. Most importantly to me though, is the stuff revolving around Boruto and Kashin Koji. Boruto and Koji are shown in what definitely looks like Orochimaru's hideout from Naruto Gaiden. There's even a snake on the wall. I have wanted Orochimaru to be actually relevant for the plot for a very long time, and it seems like my wish might finally come true after all this time, and it makes perfect sense. Besides maybe Amato, Orochimaru is realistically the absolute best person to come to in order to gain information on the Karma Seal, the Ten Tails, and Otsutsuki because of how much the guy has been researching on practically everything at this point. It was implied way back in Part 1 through Mitsuki that Orochimaru knew more about the Byakugo Seal and its history than people did back in Naruto, and this was meant to connect to the Karma Seal in some way. I'd really like to see that get elaborated on as well, but at the very least, I just want to see freaking Orochimaru talking with them and saying some cool new bits of information and hopefully get involved in the action at some point as well. I just like Orochimaru, and I really hope they don't drop the ball on this and just say, oh, it's Orochimaru's hideout but he abandoned it a year ago or something like that. Which should be very unlikely given that Yamato's job is literally to watch over Orochimaru 24/7. So we should be in the clear and we should finally get an Orochimaru return in Boruto. Now the next thing is probably what I'm most happy about, and it's the fact that Boruto seemingly cannot control Momoshiki, and that's why he's afraid of using his Karma Seal now. For using the Karma Seal likely increases the chances of Momoshiki taking over. This is something I've been thinking was the case, and I'm really happy to see it, as it means Momoshiki is still a relevant threat, and Boruto doesn't just have two whole tubes of power to use beyond the ridiculous amount of strength he already has in base. But having seen this here in Part 2, this brings me back to some of my big complaints about Chapter 80 in the end of Part 1. Back in Chapter 78, Momoshiki just took over Boruto even when Boruto was still conscious in order to free Kawaki so that omnipotence would happen as he foresaw. This aligns nicely with what we're seeing now, as even the current Boruto, who's far stronger than Momoshiki ever was, seems to be having trouble controlling Momoshiki when he uses the Karma Seal. However, the problem is that in Chapter 80, Momoshiki seemingly just couldn't take over Boruto forcefully. Sure, Momoshiki wanted Boruto to despair first so that Momoshiki could take over forever with no problem, but when Boruto wasn't despairing like he expected, Momoshiki should have been able to just forcefully take over Boruto just like in Chapter 78 to try and make Boruto despair on his own. It's a fitting act of desperation for Momoshiki. If time skip Boruto, who's stronger than Code, who's stronger than Jigen, who's stronger than Momoshiki, can't use Karma without risking Momoshiki taking over, then Momoshiki should have been just fine at the end of Part 1 like we already saw in Chapter 78. And to some extent it seems like he was trying to take over when he wanted to attack Team Shikadai, but Boruto seemingly fought back hard enough to prevent him from doing so, as he continued to try and persuade Boruto to let him take over, instead of just doing it like he did in Chapter 78. Maybe Momoshiki just wasn't being serious yet, and that's okay, but at the very end of the chapter when Momoshiki was literally screaming at Boruto to hand over his body, I think it's fair to say that Momoshiki was serious by that point, and he should have been able to just take over Boruto to kill Sasuke and do whatever from there before Boruto regains control. I think Chapter 78 of Part 1 aligns nicely with Chapter 9 of Part 2, but I feel like Chapter 80 just doesn't properly align with either of these chapters. This is something I actually addressed in my 2 rewrite videos for the end of Part 1 that I'm working on, and I was desperately hoping that the reason Boruto wasn't using his Karma Seal now was because of this exact reason, because it works so nicely with my rewrite, which you guys will eventually see in the future. So I'm very happy to see what we're seeing now in Chapter 9, but it also reinforces my critiques about Chapter 80. I just feel like they didn't do everything they could have and should have done at the end of Part 1. Now the last thing I want to touch on is mini Kurama inside Himawari. I kind of anticipate pretty split opinions on this. Some people are gonna love it and some people are gonna hate it, and I think a lot of this is going to come down to the execution of how and why Kurama is inside Himawari and what his personality is like. Personally, I have no issues with this. I never wanted Kurama to die in the first place, and I've been hoping for his return ever since he died. Whenever a tail beast dies, they normally respawn after a few years after their chakra reaccumulates, which is exactly what we saw with the Three Tails in Naruto Shippuden. So in Kurama's case, that can very easily work with Himawari, as long as Himawari inherited the most of Kurama's power. Technically, Boruto would be a potential candidate as well, but if Himawari simply inherited more of Kurama's power while Boruto inherited more of something else, then I would expect Kurama to spawn inside Himawari rather than inside Boruto. Now in regards to Kurama himself, he theoretically could just be a small version of himself with his exact same personality and memories as before, kinda like the mini baby Kurama we saw in Naruto Shippuden or the tiny form of Shukaku we see in the Boruto anime. Or he could be a brand new being that just resembles Kurama, much like what Kashin Koji is to Jiraiya and Hidari is to Sasuke, kind of like a clone. I personally would prefer to just be a mini Kurama with all of his memories and personality. That's just my personal bias, but if it was a new character, I just need to see what that new character is like in order for me to judge it properly. Because at first glance, the idea of a clone of Jiraiya might not sound as cool as Jiraiya himself, but I really like Kashin Koji a lot, and I don't have any problems with Kashin Koji being exactly who he is. It really just boils down to what they do with the new character, if it is indeed a new character. I'm very curious which of the two options you guys think it is and which of the two options you hope it is though. Do you think it's the same Kurama as before, or do you think it's a new Kurama now? And similarly, do you want it to be the same Kurama as before, or do you want it to be a new Kurama now? I think that's about all I wanted to say about the spoilers that I've seen so far, and I'll leave the rest of my thoughts for the chapter review. And just as a general update, I've had a lot of problems with editors this month and life situations in general that have made it pretty difficult to get any videos out lately, and I'm giving someone else a chance and hopefully this works out nicely, but if for whatever reason it doesn't, then I'll just go back to editing everything myself again, which is what I used to do, and half the videos you see are edited by me anyway. Hopefully I'll be able to get out more videos this month though, but that's a wrap on today's video, so thank you guys for watching until the end.
You're already under my genjutsu.
Don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, like the video, check out my podcast channel, check out Peak Fiction, become a member, and hit the bell icon for notifications.
Sorry, Sasuke. Maybe some other time.
Have a great rest of your day, and I'll catch you guys next time. Bye.